Today we're going to take a look at a build of Zaxara the Exemplary. This is a build around X spells and being able to use our commander to really capitalize on those X spells. So Zaxara cost blue, green, black, and 1 generic, otherwise known as Sultai colors. It has Death Touch. You can tap Zaxara to add 2 mana of any one color. And then whenever you cast an X spell, you're going to create a 0/0 green Hydra token and then put X +1/+1 counters on it. And this can be anything, creatures, instant sorceries, including enchantments. And so we're going to see how we have built this around getting our things to have big old counters because of our Hydras. We run 22 creatures. We run Stone Quill Serpent because it has protection from multicolored, which is great because we can attack with it. And then if our opponents have a multicolored creature, they cannot block it. It also has Reach and Trample, which is helpful to getting the damage through or leaving it back as a great blocker. Capricorn is fun for us because it will enter in with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And we can pay 2 to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you may reselect what player Capricorn is attacking. Only the player Capricorn is attacking may do this. So if we declare it as an attacker at one opponent, if they feel like paying 2, they can put an additional counter on it and have it declared somewhere else. So that's kind of a fun little political thing. We've played it before and got some nice laughs when our goat Hydra is being swung around the table. Feral Hydra comes in with X +1/+1 counters, and then we can pay 3 to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and anybody can activate this. Again, this is kind of fun because if we're trying to work together to get rid of a really big threat, our opponents can dump some extra mana into it and help us with that cause. Hungering Hydra can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, and then whenever it is dealt damage, we put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Mist Cutter Hydra cannot be countered, so that's kind of nice. It has haste and it has protection from blue. Protein Hydra, if damage would be dealt to it, we prevent it and remove that many counters. So if we cast a big old Protein Hydra, we can use it as a chump blocker for a while and remove those counters. And then whenever a +1/+1 is counter removement, we put 2 on it at the beginning of the next end step. So essentially it loses 1 and we gain 2, so making it much more difficult for the Protein Hydra to go away. Ren's Run Hydra has Reinforce, which costs X and 2 green, and we can discard this card and we put X +1/+1 counters on another creature, or this is just another nice Hydra for us that has Reach. Weirdly enough, a lot of our Hydras don't actually have Reach. Wooded Hydra, we can either morph it, which is kind of fun, because if it's more turn face up, we put 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Otherwise, when Hooded Hydra dies, we create a green snake creature token for each +1/+1 counter on it. Hydra Krasis is a favorite of ours because you're going to cast a spell, you gain half X life, and you draw half X card, and you round down each time. It has flying and trample, and then it will enter in with X +1/+1 counters. Nimbus Swimmer has flying, which is good because we do need to be able to get our damage through. We don't want our opponents to just keep trump blocking all the time, so we need to be able to eventually have flying or reach or trample to get some of that damage through. Primordial Hydra, at the beginning of our upkeep, we double the number of +1/+1 counters on it, and then as long as it has 10 or more +1/+1 counters, it has trample. Steelbane Hydra, we can pay 2 and green to remove a +1/+1 counter from it to destroy an artifact or enchantment. So if we do cast a big old Steelbane Hydra, then we can use it quite a bit to remove some things on our opponent's field that are pesky and need to go. Vastwood Hydra, when it dies, we distribute any number of +1/+1 counters on it from it to other creatures we control, which makes it great for us to be able to remove those counters and redistribute them later. Voracious Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters, and then when it enters the battlefield, we choose one of these two. Either we double the number of counters on it, or it fights another creature. And depending on what we need, we can choose to either have it fight, and even if it's going to die, it may take out another creature, which is good, or it just comes in as even a much bigger Hydra. Even if we only cast it for 5 and we double it, well, then it comes in with 10. So that's pretty good for us, no matter what option we choose. Gadwick gives us some card draw, and then whenever we cast a blue spell, we tap a non-land permanent an opponent controls. Haggar Constrictor makes it so that each creature with a +1/+1 counter has Menace. Corpjack Menace makes it so that if a +1/+1 counter is placed on a creature, twice that many are placed on it instead. Hail the Secret Streams makes our creatures with +1/+1 counters unblockable. Zagana makes it so that each creature with a +1/+1 counter has trample on it. Then we have Colonian Hydra, that when it attacks, we double the +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. And it has trample, which is going to be great for us because our stuff is going to get bigger. And then they try to declare it as a blocker. It gets bigger first when we declare the attack. Then it comes as a blocker. Trollbird Guardian gives each creature with a counter plus a trample on it. And then Crater Hoof could be a win con for us. We can go get Crater Hoof. And then all of our stuff gets massive. And the key part is it gets trample. Because a lot of our stuff does not have trample. They can chump block. Let's take a look at the sorceries. We do run some tutors, but we run Exsanguinate because this is a fun win con for us potentially. If we have a bunch of mana, we can dump into it and then take out some of our opponents and gain a bunch of life. Even if we don't kill them, that life gain could mean the difference between us losing and winning. Finale is a great tutor. We can maybe even tutor for Crater Hoof, and if we do, that generally is game. And then you'll notice some card draw things like Finale of Revelation and Mind Spring. Open into Wonder is good for us because we can cast it and make some of our creatures unblockable. And then whenever they also deal damage to a player that turn, we draw a card. Profane Tutor is great because it's got lots of options. We can have somebody lose X life. We can return a target creature from our graveyard, give another creature XX on a turn, or give some creatures fear, which means that they can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or black creatures. We cannot choose the same mode, that's important to know. This is not like some of the other modal cards, you must choose different modes. Torment of Hellfire is another way of possibly killing our opponents, or at the very least, really severely crippling them when they have to sacrifice some of their permanents so that they don't die, or even discard cards. Villainous Wealth is kind of fun, because we're going to steal some cards from our opponents, and then we're going to be able to cast them. So we dump a big Villainous Wealth on the table, and we can get a bunch of things from our opponents that they weren't expecting us to take. Rishkar's Expertise just gives us some card draw, which is nice. And then we run a bunch of interaction. Gridlock helps us to tap some permanents. Icy Blast also allows us to do that. Pulled from Tomorrow is just card draw, and so is Blue Sun Zenith and Stroke of Genius. Now you'll notice that we're purposely running X spells that you probably wouldn't see, so that even if the spell doesn't resolve, Zaxara will trigger and make us a Hydra regardless on cast. Our enchantments are kind of light because we have some other ways of ramping, but what we do have is important for the deck, like the Ozolith, so that if one of our creatures dies, those counters actually go on the Ozolith, and then we can put those counters onto another creature. So it's really important that, so what if our stuff dies? Then it's going to come back as something even worse when those counters get moved to another creature. Combine Chrysalis gives our creature tokens flying, which all of our creature Hydras that we make off Zaxara are creature tokens. And Elementalist Palette is nice because when we cast an X spell, we put 2 charge counters on it, and then we can tap Elementalist Palette for colorless mana for each charge counter we have to cast an X spell. So this can help us really pump some big mana into our X spells. Our enchantments that we have here help us to really improve our counters that come on our creatures, as well as really help us over the course of the game. So we run Heightened Scales to give us more counters. Mana Bloom is fun because even if we're only putting X equals 1, we can remove the charge counter for it. It goes back to our hand. We can replay this. So every turn of ours, we could at the very least make a 1/1. Branching Evolution helps us to put more counters on things. Court of Garenbrig is kind of fun. It introduces the Monarch to the game, which is going to make it also hard for our opponents to attack us because we do have some pretty big Hydras. So it's likely we'll stay the Monarch for a while and then double the counters on our creatures. Primal Empathy. At the beginning of our upkeep, we will draw cards to the greatest power, or we're putting a +1/+1 counter on it. Some of our stuff, Unbound and Flourishing, helps us double the X cost of our spells. And then Primeval Bounty has lots of options. If we're casting a creature spell, we create a 3/3. Whenever a non-creature spell is cast, we put 3 +1/+1 counters on a target creature, and then whenever a land hits the battlefield, we gain 3 life. Chances are we're going to be able to do 2 of these each turn, which is even better for us. Our lands are pretty much what you would expect. We are running Karn's Bastion so that we can pay for it to proliferate and put more counters on all of our Hydras. Mystic Sanctuary so we can get back an instant or sorcery as long as we have 3 or more islands. Orin Reef the Vastwood is nice because we can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each green creature that enter the battlefield, and our Hydra tokens are green creatures. So if we make 1 or 2 Hydra tokens, we can tap Orin Reef the Vastwood to put an additional counter on it, And then if we have something like hardened scales out on the battlefield, we even put more counters on them instead. Have you played this deck with Zaxara? Do you have other cards that we have not included? What are your experiences with it overall? We would love to hear some of your feedback and how this deck has gone for you. Let us know in the comments below.